Hi there and welcome to The Creative Endeavor. In this episode, I'm interviewing Carla Grace, who's a young artist based in Australia who paints predominantly wildlife. She does it in an exquisite, hyper-realistic way. I started following Carla on Instagram recently when somebody reached out to me and said that she would be a good person to interview for the podcast. And when I started following her work, learning a little bit more about her, I was just blown away. She seems to have a lot to say and seems to be dominating that business side of her art. Now, I wanted to hear more about the business side and how Carla makes it work, and even about her daily routine, not to mention her personal story and how she got started in the first place. This is what The Creative Endeavor is all about, taking these stories from artists from around the world and bringing them to you. And so we have so many different examples of people out there living their artistic dreams. Now, I certainly got a lot out of this conversation, and it's my sincere hope that you will too. So without further ado, this is The Creative Endeavor. Well, Carla Grace, welcome to the Creative Endeavor podcast. It's an absolute pleasure having you here.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Well, just to kick things off here, why don't you start off by telling us about your story, maybe how you got into art in the first place, maybe a little bit more on your background before we get into your fantastic art.
Yeah, I was born in South Africa, and we grew up in I've immigrated 5 times, but 3 of those immigrations have been in different parts of Africa. So wildlife has always been part of my life and is something that I'm really drawn to. So that made choosing my subject matter really easy. And I moved to Australia in 2014 after dropping out of uni, and then just decided to give it a go. I sort of transitioned from working full-time as a legal secretary, and then slowly gave myself more and more time dedicated to the artwork, and then eventually it became my full-time career, which was a scary day to launch into, but well worth it.
Wow. I definitely want to unpack that and find out more about that. So tell us a little bit more about what it was like, because I mean, looking at your Instagram page, you do some fantastic wildlife paintings. So obviously this background that you had growing up in South Africa and your background in Zimbabwe as well, that filtered through into these fantastic paintings. So tell me a little bit more about what that was like and some of the things that you were exposed to growing up.
Well, Zimbabwe was, I think, the key part of my life. We were there most of my childhood, and it was during the time before the war sort of kicked off, and most people had to leave, which was our case as well. Um, it was when animals were sort of part of your everyday life. Our lawn, our backyard ran straight into the Kariba Lake, and so often we had crocodiles on our lawn at night. There was a problem with hippos coming up eating the lawn, and when the lake was still low, we had a lot of elephants coming through and other animals as well. It was just a rich vibrancy of wildlife, and so I think I never saw animals as something scary. It was just part of everyday life. And so the way that translates now through to the paintings is I'll never paint something that's ferocious or that you'll look at and think, oh, that's a monster, because that's never how I've seen them. And I look for a characteristic or a poise, something in the eyes of the animal or the way that the animal's holding themselves that I feel does justice to how an animal should be felt or experienced. And then that comes through in the way that I paint them, which is why I work realistically as well.
Mm. So have you always been drawn to that realistic style? Have you tried anything impressionistic at all? Or is it
I have
mainly
tried.
right?
And I'm terrible at it. I'm so bad. I think it's just a personality thing, comes down to just wanting to be in control and doing everything so precisely and disciplined that I just have to get it real. It needs to look like you can touch it. Yeah, like there's something behind there.
I suppose it's almost a homage to the animal itself in a way. You want to do that as much justice as possible and almost,
Yeah,
yeah, make it leap off the canvas. I really feel that when I look at your work. Sometimes it's nice to see when a painting goes beyond a photograph, and I think your work does that in many cases.
thank you.
And just in honor of the wolf painting behind you, I'd like you and everybody else watching this on YouTube to notice I'm wearing my lone wolf cap. Yes, check that out. Eh? How about
Perfect.
that? Awesome. So you studied you were it sounds like you went from a background where art wasn't really part of it at all, and then you just got to this point where you threw up your hands and went, okay, that's it, I've got to go for art. Tell me what that moment was like for you, and maybe actually what were you studying for? What was the university degree that you were going for in the beginning?
Well, I finished high school and then I never really wanted to go to university because I didn't know what I wanted to do. The last thing on my career list was to be an artist, just because everyone knows the stereotype associated with being an artist. It's not a great career choice, all these different things, despite always being good at art. So I went to uni anyway and did sort of a first year with a whole range of different subjects, and then hated it, couldn't see myself doing anything more in that area, and decided, well, I'm good at art, so I'm going to drop out and go to a fine arts uni. Went there and hated it.
Oh
But I
wow.
stayed to get a diploma just because that was what was the thing to do. Just having nothing to your name after being at uni for 3 years didn't really sit well with me, I guess. So I stayed for 2 years, got a diploma, and dropped out. My work is not very conceptual, and it's not very traditional in the sense of the progressive nature that the art career is typically meant to take, especially if you're going through a university system and you go and you get your galleries and your grants, etc., and you build your career that way through a massive portfolio. That sort of didn't work for me, and I had a lot of conflict with the tutors. So 2 years,
Wow.
I dropped out and moved to Australia. So
Wow. So you were doing your university diploma outside of Australia?
in New Zealand, yeah,
In New
yeah,
Zealand. Okay, well, look,
yeah,
we won't mention the name of the institution, but
yeah.
I can definitely relate to that experience 100%. And it's funny, when you say your work isn't conceptual, maybe it's just me, but I see realism and realist paintings as highly conceptual. I think there's actually a lot of thought that goes into what you do, and maybe sometimes it doesn't have to be a complicated idea,
Mm.
but I think our role as artists, and I'd love to see if you agree, but I think our role as artists is to communicate visual phenomenon and do it with feeling and also in such a way that people can understand. I think it's a great failing of many tertiary institutions that they turn out art and artists that the public can't get behind and they can't understand. And therefore, I think it's failed as art.
Yeah, well, that's actually really cool that you say that, because that's what I was feeling while I was studying, and then leaving university really confirmed that for me. It depends what you want to achieve in the art industry. Of course, university will work really well for some artists, but it really won't for others as well. And realism tends to fall into the art bracket where you're doing something so true to the nature of what you're painting that there's a removal of the artist from the artwork itself. And it's not a loss of translation, but it's almost an enhancement of what the artist is trying to achieve by doing it so realistically. So there's a lot of depth and theory behind that as well, which comes across first and foremost as a visual concept, which you then unpack. Whereas I found at university, they didn't want the visual aspect of it as much as they wanted the conceptual aspect of it. So
Wow.
I
Mm.
struggled to justify that, because I was like, well, if people don't like what they're looking at, they're not going to want to unpack it. So
Mm.
it just didn't gel with how I saw art as being
No, I get it.
a
Yeah.
good avenue for me to take.
I totally get it. Can you remember, can you give me an example of one of the criticisms or a critique that you heard? Maybe some phrase that one of the lecturers
Oh.
threw your way and you're like, "Oh, I'm taking that one."
Uh, I think it was just their rejection of the visual aspect of what I do. I was always wanting to make something look impressive,
Yeah.
and then the concept would support that. And
Fair.
they were
Yeah.
always just like, well, why are you doing that? And I was like, well, why can't I do that? And then it was always, well, don't backchat me. And I was like, well,
Oh, wow.
I was just, I can't win because it's just uh, not me. So, yeah,
I hear you. But I mean, isn't it great when you finally hit your stride and you find the thing that is
yeah,
you and then it just starts flowing? That's what I get.
absolutely.
I remember the university days that I had in Perth, Western Australia, quite well, as much as I've tried to forget them. But I had one lecturer who kept saying to me, and again, exactly the same thing, because I came up wanting to paint landscapes, so and realistic landscapes, and I was into impressionism in the Heidelberg School and these big grand Australian scenes with gum trees and cows and all that
Mm.
sort of thing. And I remember one of these lecturers said to me, said, Andrew, this is all well and good, but what's in it for the viewer? What's in it
Oh.
for the viewer? This is one of those questions that sounds very clever, but it's impossible to answer.
Yeah.
And it, because I just think it's so stupid, because what's in it for the viewer is exactly what the viewer brings to it. And clearly
Yes,
she brought
exactly.
nothing to the artwork, but it took me a while. I mean, I don't know about you, but it took me some time to get over that, because suddenly coming out of the art school, again, I'm not sure if you can relate to this, but coming straight out of the art school, I felt like, okay, maybe I'm not an artist. I have no idea where I
Mm.
fit.
Yeah, in the art school, the institute sense of the word artist, it has that stereotype attached to it as well, where you're waiting on grants and funds and things. And I just thought I'm not that kind of person. And it also came down. There's a massive pressure to win awards, enter competition, and get awards behind your name. Then you'll be a recognizable artist, and then people will take you seriously. Galleries will take note, etc., etc. And my artwork doesn't win awards in in that sense. It's and that doesn't make me less of an artist. And I think getting confident behind calling myself an artist after dropping out of uni and essentially failing at being your typical artist, it took a while. And my husband, I think he was the main catalyst for giving me the confidence to say to people, "I'm an artist. I'm
Yeah,
good at it."
that's fantastic.
Like that's
Yeah.
what I do full time. And then people, like, I don't know if it's the culture of Australia, but they sort of glaze over when I first say, "Oh, I'm an artist." Then if you sort of see them retract in their brain, being like, "How do I get out of this conversation?"
You're what I would call a glitch in the matrix. You run foul of their it flies in the face of their programming.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
that's how I see it. But for some people are cool. Some people are like, oh yeah, and then they want to ask you all about it. Now,
yeah.
did you go for awards? Like out of your diploma, did you try and enter some of these?
Yeah, I've entered a few competitions, gotten through as a finalist for many of them. I won a minor award for painting, I think it was 2 years ago. I've been a finalist in the David Shepherd Wildlife Artist of the Year Award.
Congratulations.
Uh, thank you.
Yeah.
But that was during a time where I was really motivated to enter competitions and build my resume according to what I would like established artists, like art industries, to take note of. And I've sort of moved past that now because of social media and how accessible I become to everyone. It sort of has become a little bit more of a background focus for me. I'm not as determined to enter and win competitions because a lot of my artwork got damaged, mishandled by the galleries that were presenting them, all those sorts of things. So when it comes to weighing up the pros and cons of doing the competitions, not just that, but the financial aspect of it, because you're posting artwork international and you're paying duties and shipping and framing, and it just eventually you got to weigh up, why am I doing this, and then just set your mind for it and go.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Not to mention the emotional toll that it takes as
Yeah.
well. Despite all the technical things that you have to run around to achieve,
Yeah.
the emotional toll that it takes. I've found that with awards as well. I've entered a few, but I vowed years ago to never do that again. And I've only ever won one award, which was the Alina Brady Art Award from my high school, Applecross
Awesome.
Senior High School, which was an award that was given to me by the other students
Nice.
for showing dedication to art. I was that weird kid sitting in the class even during the lunchtime after art was finished. After the class was finished, I was sitting there drawing in my file, and they thought, well, he's pretty dedicated. We'll give it to this kid.
I actually won an award when I was 14 years old in New Zealand. It was some high school competition where you could just enter in all your work, and I won the overall. So I think I was in year 9. I won the overall art award. So they did it by year and then an overall one, and I won that one award. So
Fantastic.
that I think was the first one that I won.
Excellent. So
But
how many, jumping around a little bit here, Carla, but how long were you in New Zealand for?
um, 5, 6 years.
Wow. And where were you based?
Tauranga in the Bay of Plenty.
Oh, beautiful. Did you get a chance to see this beautiful country, travel around?
Most of it, mostly the North Island. I found that when you're actually living in a place, you don't tend to do the touristy things. So even like Zimbabwe, and then so we fled Zim to New Zealand, stayed till I was 14, and then we moved to Zambia, where I stayed till I was about 19, and then back to New Zealand to Auckland to study for a little bit, and then I decided to move to Australia because why not?
Why not? Wow, you certainly have, a really diverse, fantastic past, it sounds like. What an adventure. Um, you mentioned something there just a little while ago about the David Shepherd Art Award. And David Shepherd's a hero of mine. I mean, and I'm big into wildlife art. I mean, I've got my father's sculptures behind me. He's a wildlife artist, and I just love David Shepherd's work. So, have you got any art heroes or influences that you can share with us?
CJ Henry, I think, would be my biggest influence, mostly because her and I actually have very similar story in terms of being born in South Africa, and then moving and then establishing ourselves. She's moved further and moved to New York, but the way that she approaches art and the whole industry of art has been a huge, I think, release to me,
Mhm.
releasing me from the traditionalist ambitions. I think you sort of can bypass the galleries, even though you still do need gallery relationships to some extent. It's not essential, and her whole career has been fantastic for that. Coco Chanel, I know she's not an artist, but the way she also approached the challenges that she faced. I've got many business inspirations. It's not just artists, I think. Your artwork was actually when I first moved, because I first moved to Perth when I moved to Australia, and I went to the Applecross Gallery, and one of your portraits of an Indigenous elderly man was hanging in the Applecross Gallery, and the gallery owners, they were just glowing over this portrait. And I remembered your name, and that was, I think, 2012 now.
Wow, wow. Okay, yeah,
Long time ago.
yeah.
I
Okay.
I went there just for a short visit. Had a little exhibit
Hmm.
in 2012. Yeah, I think that a long time ago. And then dropped out of uni in between then and 2014. So yeah, so I've known your name for a while too.
Yeah, that chap's name was Colin Dixon, and he's a guest on the podcast as well. His
Awesome.
episode is, I think by the time this goes out, I would have already released that one.
Cool.
So Yeah, no, fantastic people. And when it comes to galleries, that was my most positive experience was with that gallery in Applecross. For the most part, I've just got a long string of horror stories when it comes to working
Yes.
with galleries. But let's dive into that in a way because I find what you're saying there is quite interesting because isn't it interesting what's happening now with today's world, with social media, with the internet, that the power has really been put in our hands and we're now able to reach our market, our clients, our buyers directly. And now the galleries are nearly obsolete. Now, I know a few of them out there would be grumpy that I'd be saying that, but how do you find that whole relationship?
Um, hmm, it's a very tiring relationship that I'm finding at the moment. It's almost, I think, I don't know, I've attributed it to the whole starving artist thing where artists tend to be quite needy, I think, in galleries. I mean, the history of galleries is that they're providing a service for artists to get their work out, and then they create this big portfolio, and then an artist becomes noticeable through a gallery, through the prestige of the gallery. So the galleries have seen me as, I guess, I need them rather than it's actually them needing me. And the way that I can market myself on social media would benefit them. And it's sort of, if you flip it around and look at it from a business perspective, the artist is actually the one paying the gallery for their services, whereas the galleries treat it like the galleries are paying the artist. So there's a strained, I think, relationship at the moment, especially because artists are being so self marketed, self promoted through social media, that galleries are sort of needing to step up the game. And I've struggled to find galleries that can do what I can't through social media, especially. Yeah.
It's so interesting, isn't it? I mean, we go to these establishments with our hat in hands, almost begging for,
Yeah.
it feels like applying for a job. But what you're saying is true, and
Yeah.
I've always felt that you know what, you work for me, and
Exactly.
and consequently, I didn't get into many galleries with that attitude. Did have
Yeah.
some positive experiences, but I did have some very negative ones too. But I find that that paradigm, that business model is still clinging on, and that's something that I get asked a heck of a lot through social media, by email. I've people asking me all the time, Andrew, how do I get into galleries? I'm like, why do you want to get into galleries? And now we have this fantastic example in you, and maybe we don't need them at all. Maybe we can actually make this work as a business. Because I mean, look, let's face it. On top of yeah, they might promote you, they might market your work and all of that, but they're taking a massive chunk of your income. And if you do have a little bit of business savvy, you can keep that money and reinvest it into your business and maybe even delegate that to somebody else, not a gallery.
Mm. Yeah. So I've sort of now taken a look at the whole gallery service as a way of delegating. So I have two pieces in a gallery in Singapore, which is unfortunately becoming one of those negative experiences because they're just not worth their cut at the moment, and they're asking for 50%.
Whoa.
So I said to them, you've got to be able to do what I can't. So you've got to be able to reach a market that I can't. You've got to be able to promote it to people at a price bracket that I can't. And you've got to be able to deliver a service to those people, as well as to me, that is worth that percentage. And they convinced me that they were, able to do that. And the past few months, it just hasn't, wouldn't
Hmm.
even be comfortable paying them 30%, which is your
Wow.
usual. But I found that online galleries, so if a gallery has a big online presence, has their gallery set up online so people can access them from any corner of the world, that's an awesome gallery. Like Blue Thumb is a really good example of that. It's
Hmm.
an Australian based online art gallery.
Oh, wow.
I've had a lot of exposure through Blue Thumb. They take, I think it's 30% as well. So your standard
Wow.
gallery cut.
Very reasonable.
Yeah, really reasonable. And they take care of the logistics of the shipping. You just got to package it and then have it ready for a guy to pick up. So there are some galleries that are really stepping up to it, and they don't actually have a physical gallery space.
Hmm.
So needing the bricks and mortar of a gallery space isn't really an essential element that we're looking for anymore. It's become a lot more open.
Isn't it amazing how much the world is changing now through the internet? I mean, it
Yeah,
almost seems cliche to say now, but I still marvel at the fact that just how quickly things have gone, and now that the paradigm's shifted, it just feels like galleries have been caught on the back foot, and they're just trying to keep up now. So it's wonderful to hear if somebody is going to embrace that technology, represent artists in a really good way, and
yeah.
then promote that and push it out there. Let's back up a little bit. Let's say there's somebody listening to this podcast and they go, okay, look, all this stuff about galleries, all that said, okay, that's all well and good, but I still feel I really want to go for a gallery. I'm gonna go get my work into a gallery. What would be your best advice to getting somebody just in the door? How would they make that approach?
I find that when the artist approaches the gallery is automatically got the upper hand when it comes to how they treat the artist. So I've tried that, and I've noticed the difference between how galleries treat me. If I go into a gallery and I say, "Hey, I'm CARLA GRACE. I would like to seek representation through you. What is involved?" Then they're all like, "Oh, you first have to provide me with your portfolio, and then we will consider your work and rank it with the rest. Have I seen your work before?" Like it starts to get very, you know,
Snooty.
yeah, very snooty. Whereas I've found that the galleries that have approached me online, so through my marketing, through the social media presence, that have approached me and said, "Hey, we love your work. We would love for you to consider hanging, an artwork with us." Then I can say, "Okay, what can you do for me? How can we work together that we can both benefit, and that we're both going to be well off together on this relationship," and you establish a relationship with them based on a more confident approach, I guess, rather than a, "Please, sir, can you
Yeah.
help me?" Yeah.
Yeah.
It's but it's hard to do that because if galleries aren't looking at your work, let's say social media, it just isn't your thing. You're finding marketing yourself very challenging because it's hard to put yourself out there and say, "This is what I do, like my stuff." It's be prepared for a gallery, have a pitch prepared, be confident about what it is that you do. Don't walk in there without a portfolio. Uh, Go in there smart, like look smart. Don't look like you're a starving artist. Look like you're someone that's worth their time. And confidence sells way above even, I mean, you can present really bad art, but if you present it in a way that says this is going to be the next new thing, without being cocky, they'll take note and they'll listen to you. So if galleries are going to be your way out, going to be the way that you present yourself to people, then you're going to need to be really confident about what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and where you're going to go with it. So coming in with a body of work and not having anything to talk about beyond that body of work won't really get you too much notice. They want to see ambition. They want to see a future in you. They don't want to be, "Oh, it's just a flash in the pan" sort of thing. So they really want to see that there can be a further relationship rather than just hanging a piece of artwork. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So I can see as well from that type of approach, your work would really have to speak for itself as well. Your
Yeah.
work would be doing a lot of the sales job for you, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so naturally, you would have to have like quality work. Wouldn't you say?
Yes. Yes.
Mm.
So coming in with artwork that's on really cheap paper that looks like it's just been slapped together, things that when you look at the back, you're worried about the archival quality of it. Galleries want to see something with quality in it, but they also want to see a bit of quantity. Like they want to be able to see what a body of your work would look like. So if you're only doing 2 or 3 paintings and you rock up and you say, "Hey, look at my stuff," and you don't really have any future plans, you don't really know where you're going, you're presenting it on the cheapest of cheap art materials that you can get from the art store, it presents a very unreliable avenue for them to pursue, because you're not just putting your stuff in a gallery. The gallery is presenting your stuff as their brand as well. So if you want to go to the highest selling, most posh gallery in the city that you live in, you're going to need to present artwork that supports their brand as well, not just go in and say, hey, I'm really good, and then you present work that doesn't support what their vision is as well. Then it's not going to get past the door, really. It's would just be a sad story to add to your list.
Well,
Yeah.
that was one of the mistakes that I actually made early on as well, is not finding an appropriate fit,
Mm.
not doing my due diligence, my homework, and finding someplace that would be a good home for my work.
Yeah.
You know, it was like either no too contemporary, but I was like, well, this is
Yeah.
a really good gallery. They've got a great name. Consequently, they're like, no, you're not showing here, kid. You
Yeah.
know, we don't do landscapes. We don't do cows and gum trees.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
you know, so your the social media aspect, the
Mm.
online aspect has really been, would you say that's been responsible for putting your name out there, putting Carla Grace on the map?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Without social media, uh, I don't even know what I'd do, because I've been around to local galleries and they've just sort of done the whole we'll consider your portfolio thing, and just, yeah, the ones that do represent me have found me through social media. So yeah, without social media, it's definitely the most powerful marketing tool for artists or people with talent, uh, people that want to do something outside of a corporate, I guess, an industry structure where you get recognized within your industry through firms. It's definitely the most powerful marketing tool.
Mm.
Yeah.
I just love it. I mean, Instagram especially for how it connects people, because I mean that's how I found out about you, through Ben. And shout out to Ben, the truck driver. In
Thanks,
fact,
Ben.
do you mind if I read Ben's message?
Yeah, sure.
So this is from Ben. Hey Andrew, really enjoying your podcast. Actually enjoy everything you put out. So cheers, Ben. You didn't have to say that. Um, hey, you may already know of her, but I've been following a South African artist living in Adelaide who moved here when she was younger. Carla Grace is her name. She has just gone from strength to strength, a very real, and just lays her heart out. I'd
Oh,
give her handle, but I don't know it. Well, it's all right. We've connected anyway. Anyway, check her out if you get a chance. So,
oh, thanks, Ben.
and so it's from messages like that as well. It's great because I do get requests for people to interview. But when I first saw your Instagram, I followed you immediately, and then I noticed, wow, you've got nearly 50,000 followers. Now I know it's not a numbers game, but still, that's no small feat, of getting that many followers. So how long have you been on Instagram for, and how have you amassed this? What can you attribute that kind of
Cool.
following to?
Instagram's a tricky one because they're always changing the algorithm. So as soon as you get comfortable with a way of working with Instagram, they'll change it. I started posting my artwork on Instagram in 2015, I believe. I didn't even want to use Instagram because I was like, I just don't get it. And then a friend of mine, Dylan, a shout out to Dylan, he actually set up my Instagram profile for me and started posting artwork. And then once he started getting it going for me, I sort of took the reins from there. But I didn't really start using it efficiently till maybe 2016, when I could actually produce the artwork at a rate that would create the momentum that you need for a daily post, and a story and friggin' hashtags.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, I mean, Instagram's changed their algorithm 3 or 4 times since I started using Instagram more efficiently. And recently, it's sort of, I like numbers. So even though you say it's not just a numbers game, I still love checking the numbers and you see the stats. And what time of the day is the best time to post, what countries are responding more to the post, what type of post gets more shares, what do people like interacting with on your story more. And I'm always trying to figure it out. I don't think it's something that I've actually really nailed, like really, really got good at, because I'm always trying to think of more creative things, better ways to post, better ways to photograph, create quality material to actually post. So I think a year ago, I got myself a really good camera. I got myself some softbox lighting. I don't know if you can see, but there's a white wall there in a room that is otherwise very brown, just to create a light surface to actually create the videos from. Otherwise, you sort of lose the contrast. So creating an environment that supports good content has become more of a focus for. It's not just creating the artwork. I think that's actually just the first step. It's once you've created the artwork, you've then got to take it and present it to the world, and then you got to sell it. And then how do you sell it? So it's become, I call it a game, but I know some people get offended when it's not a game being an artist. Well, you're
Lighten
playing.
up, people.
Yeah.
Lighten up.
It's playing, but it's at the same time it's a business as well. I offended a few people a while ago with a post where I spoke about what I do in the light of it being a business, and quite a few people got offended by that, saying, "You're an artist, it shouldn't be all about the money." And I was like, well, it's not all about the money, but at the same time, if I can't fund what I do, then I won't be able to do what I do. So yeah, you got to figure out the best way to sell your work in a way that is profitable. So it's a business.
Absolutely. It is the hardest thing to balance, I've found, is dealing with the economic aspect, yet at the same time maintaining your personal integrity, your authenticity. And social media seems to be one of these things that personally pulls me out of myself, where now I'm considering things that are external and no longer really focusing within. And so constantly it's a habit I'm getting into now of just checking back in. So I almost find that I'm going through daily rituals. I don't post every day, on Instagram. I've had a lot of trouble just keeping up with social media. So I'll post now and again just to make sure people know I haven't died. But I'll throw something up there maybe every week or every other week or something like that. But you're posting nearly daily, which is pretty impressive. And so it's no wonder you've got that many people. But I get that. It's so interesting because when you're focused on those external factors, be it recognition through social media, be it money, and now suddenly you're not focusing on the art. I get that. I think it was Alan Watts talking about this, and he was talking in regards to dancing or dancers, where the art is making it look like it is effortless and it's like a play and it's free flowing. Yet there's this amazing thought process going on behind it. And it's about balancing those two things. It is almost an impossible task.
It is. It's so challenging. At the start, I think when I was so insecure about being an artist and, doing what I do, I was trying to do artwork that I thought other people would want to see.
Wow.
And that was the worst thing that I could have done. For myself. I would burn out regularly. I would just inspiration is a very dangerous thing to talk about because it's not the drive. So inspiration is the creativity behind the ideas, but then it's just bloody hard work to actually make the artwork. So I had no inspiration, like at all, for ideas to get the process going, to finish artwork. And then my husband said to me, just make art, just paint things that you like, that you want to paint. And then that is where that realness and the authenticity behind the artwork. And then now when I do a post, I can talk about it from the heart because it's come from me and it's part of who I am, is that painting that I've made. It's come from a history of working towards finally getting that piece out there. So every post that I make, I'm able to put a bit of myself in there without it being, I guess, too much information.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah, creating artwork for other people, you'll always lose yourself in that. And if you're doing Instagram, doing social media marketing, if you're doing it for things that don't resonate with you, you will lose yourself in it completely.
Mm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Authenticity is one of my
Mm,
favorite words. And again, something that I struggled with in the beginning was,
mm,
and this was a byproduct of art school, funnily enough,
mm.
where everybody was chasing around trying to find what was original
Yeah.
and consequently not focusing on what actually matters to them.
Yeah.
And so that's how you end up with all these weird and wonderful things that no one likes, not even the artists that created them. And meanwhile, everybody's ignoring their dreams and what
Ah,
truly drives them. So
I get that so much.
yeah, when I suddenly focused on going, okay, I'm going to paint exactly what I want to paint,
Mm,
that's when my career just took off to
yep,
another dimension. And
absolutely.
now I can truly say that I paint what I want, even
Good.
when I'm doing a commission for somebody.
Mm,
So how have you found that, like the commission process? Do you take
mm.
commissions, and how do you balance that out and maintain your authenticity when you are painting something for somebody else?
Uh, I originally was doing more commissions than original work. It
Mhm.
was sort of what gave me the sort of go juice to give myself more time to put into my artwork, because I was like, oh, more people are wanting me to do stuff. So uh, my career, I can completely say thanks to commissions. And I've transitioned away from commissions purely because it's another person's vision. When someone commissions a painting, they own the copyrights, so they have that main hold on the artwork. Whereas when you create an original, it's completely 100% you.
Oh,
Uh, so I do take commissions very rarely. I've been doing this one behind me, and I've got another one on the go on that side, and I just finished one. I'm doing commissions at the moment because life stages, I'm expecting my first child in September, and I just finished my first like big scale solo exhibit in July. So I was doing original work all the way up till the exhibit, and had put a few commissions on hold to do between the end of July and when the baby's due, mostly because I am just exhausted all the time. It's been the worst pregnancy, and so I've struggled to have those original thoughts and those original concepts. So doing commissions for me has sort of given me a little bit more space
sure.
to just focus on painting, getting the job done, getting it done really well, and then it's also a guaranteed sale at the end of the day. So there's no financial pressure, knowing that I'll be having a baby soon, which will take a bit of time away from my studio.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. Well, I do look forward to knowing what that's like to welcome a little one into the world. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But as soon as we're talking about it, I do want to mention um, a post that you made on your Instagram a little while ago, and I loved this when I saw this come up because I was just like, "Wow, you go, girl." Um, do you mind if I share it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Perfect. So here's the post, and you've said here, and it's got two pictures of your fabulous paintings, and then you just basically looking in a very candid way to the camera. If you plan on having children anytime soon, we won't sign you on. Quotes said by a gallery in Sydney after I got married. And here's another quote: "Now that you're going to be a mum, your career should now come forth as a priority." End quote. Said by a famous fine art photographer to me who has his own children, but he never sees them. And my response to these people, middle finger emoji. To me, this talks about, you know, finding your own way of approaching your art, finding that thing that works for you, not allowing these outside influences to put this undue, stress and pressure on you. So how do you find this? How do you find your balance now that you're about to, welcome a little one into the world? How are you going to continue with your art and make this work from here on out?
Uh, the most honest answer is I don't know. I think talking about your priorities and things, I think if I were to try and genuinely prioritize my life, I would always be fighting a losing battle. Uh, it's I think it really does come down to balancing, finding a balance between being a mum, being a wife, being a friend, being a daughter, being, a cousin. You've got so many things going on in your life, and you got to balance it all. It's not a matter of priority. If I were to prioritize, I would say my marriage would be my number one priority, because without my husband, I lose the most fundamental support structure that I have in my life. And so anything other than my marriage is just going to be a balancing act. So that might upset a few people saying, no, your kids should be the most important thing. That's almost a topic for another day, though. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be, without my career, I think I wouldn't be half the person that I would be able to be for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids wouldn't be able to see me achieving the best possible result out of my life and being the best version that I can be of myself. And so they wouldn't have that role model as well in their life. So there are so many ways to look at it and juggle the different elements that make up your life, whether it's your kids, your family, your career. I think to prioritize one over the other, you might lose yourself in that process as well. So I'm very aware and very sensitive as to what I should expect of myself when it comes to being a mother, as well as what to expect of myself as an artist and this business owner and career focused person. I don't think I can be one better than the other independently of each other. I think being a mother is going to be integral to who I am as an artist and a career woman, and being an artist and career woman is going to be integral to who I am as a mother as well. So I don't think I'll be able to ever separate those two. It'll just be a balancing act, and I don't know what that's going to look like.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
I'm sure it's going to be tiring,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll get it wrong a lot of the time, but there will be a lot of the times where I'll get it right too. And I hope that everyone's happy to go along the journey with me because I'm
Yeah.
sure there will be many exhausted looking Carla Grace art posts on Instagram being like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. But how
So,
how how is it though? I mean that people. I mean, so there we had an example of a gallery, and
oh,
then
yeah.
and then a photographer giving you this, this ration that you didn't deserve, and your reaction is almost like, well, watch me. I'll find my
Yeah.
way. I'll do my thing.
It's all background noise at the end of the day.
Yeah.
What other people have to say about my life, there's got to be a disconnect between how seriously you take other people's opinions when they don't know who you are. They don't know what you actually do, what you stand for, what your private life looks like. I have a handful of people who I genuinely care about what they think. And if they see an imbalance happening in my life, then I will take what they say seriously. But otherwise, if you let everyone tell you how to live your life and do what you got to do, like, oh, maybe I should have priorities and I'm a terrible person if my kids aren't first on my priority list, and how am I going to live with myself, or people are no longer going to take me seriously because I'm a mum. And I mean, the art industry as a whole, historically, artists were always men and collectors were always men, and so the whole shift in the modern art era has been creating an avenue for women to be successful as well. I mean, there's still a huge gap in there. I mean, male artists earn typically 47% more than female artists in the same industry,
Wow.
and it's the gap is sort of starting to close. But that was something I struggled with actually at the start, was do I present myself as a female or do I create a gender neutral account online? And I decided, whatever, I'll just carry on and see what happens.
Wow.
So there are many different parts associated with all of it, but I think ignoring the noise is going to be a big part of me being able to focus on being a mum as well as an artist. I mean, I've had women email me calling me narcissistic because I put myself in posts and all these things. So
Really?
yeah, just
Oh,
unreal.
gee. Lighten up, people.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, if you took everything so seriously, I mean, people are going through their own journey as well, which
Sure.
influences the way that they will receive what I post, and they react based on their experiences. So I can never really take anything people say personally because I don't know where they're coming from either.
From here, let's track back a little bit, if you don't mind. Um, that moment when you were holding your job, your regular paycheck and your income, and you're like, nope, that's it. I'm going to cut and run. I'm going into full-time art. Can you talk to me about that moment, what you were feeling, what that was like for you? Take us back to that time.
I moved to Cairns from Perth with, at the time, he was just my partner. And I went into doing more commission based work 2 days a week. And I worked 3 days a week as a receptionist at a career apprenticeship firm place. And it got to a point where I I had the support from my husband, now husband, then partner, where he said to me, just do it. Because I said to him, I feel like I can do this full time. I think it will be successful. I think I'll be able to charge what I need to be able to do that. And he said to me, just do it. If you want to do it, give it a go. So I did. And it took 3 months for me to make my first sale. I was down to 80 cents to my name. And
Wow, that close to the wire, huh?
I was working 14 hours a day, just at the end of myself, I guess, to absolutely put it all on the line. And then I made my first sale, and then it just went on from there and grew and grew. So that happened because I was also putting myself out there constantly. I was posting online. I was doing as much as I could through Blue Thumb, which was the online gallery that I spoke about earlier. And people just slowly started to see my work. And because I was focusing on doing things really well and consistently, and we had, my husband and I, we had spoken together and we came up with, what does my brand want to look like? What do I want to achieve? Where am I going to go with it? What is it going to look like on a daily basis to actually make it possible? So I didn't just jump in there with no plan, with no idea about what to expect from my day. I've heard a lot of artists say, sometimes I just don't feel like painting. And I just, it'll take me months to get one painting done. And then I look at what they send through and it's like, oh, this painting took me a month. And I was like, that shouldn't take you a month to do. It sort of comes from a lack of just working, looking. And that's what I said about sort of inspiration being a tricky thing earlier, was inspiration is not going to get your work done for you. It's only that, maybe that early motivation that you need to start the piece. But I find that my inspiration for a painting almost never exists, or it'll last for the initial idea, and then I've just got to work, just get up every day, work, focus on getting it done during the day. I set a goal for the day, what I want to achieve, what the day is going to look like. And I got to do that, because if I don't, then I'll fall behind on schedule. And slowly, a painting that would have been worth the time and effort that it took to do in that planned bracket of time is no longer worth it, and it's going to be costing me money, and I'll be losing value on the artwork. And then when it comes to the sale of the artwork, something that should have been worth the time that I put into it is suddenly, I feel like I'm ripping myself off because it took me too long, because I didn't establish or maintain my work goal to get it done. So it's not just a matter of living the dream. I'm the artist. I can get up when I want. I can paint when I want. It's very much, if you don't do it, no one else is going to do it. So you got to do it in a way that makes it worth your time. So finding that balance has been really good as well as challenging.
There's no greater motivator that I've found than fear. Early on, fear of not being able to pay the rent, not being able to put
Yeah.
gas in the car, not being able to go here, there, or wherever I wanted because I just couldn't afford to, and
Yeah.
that fear of missing out. And I learned pretty quick in the beginning that I
Mm.
needed to set the pace. I was very young. I was one of the lucky ones, I guess. I was very young when I started into full time art, but initially I was doing a bunch of spinning my tires and maybe just taking too long with the piece. But you mentioned a few words there that are my ears prick almost like a dog that hears a particular phrase. It's almost like a command for me. Plan, consistency, goals. Like
Yeah.
these are things that have become almost part of my personal religion here, where I have to live my day every day structured. Otherwise it doesn't happen. And so I just appreciate that so much. And you see other people who, unfortunately they're kidding themselves if they think it's not going to be work, because now you're going from a position of, if you were working a job, you have somebody else set the pace for you. You have
Yeah.
somebody else managing your time and managing the tasks, and now suddenly you're the boss. Well, what do you
Yeah.
do with all that power? Well, I can just wake up at 9:30 in the morning and
Yeah.
drink my coffee whenever I want, and I can clock off whenever I want. Uh-uh.
No, doesn't work.
It's going to be very short-lived, and you'd be going
Yeah,
back begging for the same job you just left. So
absolutely.
I appreciate what you're saying so much. So you have a schedule and a routine. I know that routine is about to change. It's about to be a wholesale change in your life. But let's just say, the baby aside,
Yep.
let's say that you were, just going to be working your usual routine. Can you
Hmm.
walk us through what that daily routine looks like?
Yeah. So I would get up every day at, let's say, 6:30 and start painting at 7 o'clock in the morning. This would be, before showering or anything. I'd have coffee, breakfast, sit down, and start. Well, not necessarily painting. I'd usually do admin first thing in the morning, mostly because I'm not a morning person and I take forever to come alive. And so I would spend an hour and a half doing admin in the morning, and then I would do 30 minutes exercise. And that would just boost everything up. I'd be ready to go. That's when I would have my shower and, wash my hair and feel fresh, ready for the day. So from about 9 o'clock through till 4:35, I would be painting uh, and making videos. So my day isn't just painting. It's a lot of it comes because of the social media aspect of it. I would break up my painting time with videoing and creating this dynamic flow between the two that actually created a bit of space to step away from the painting and look at it and reassess it and then keep going. So my typical day would be 10 hours on average, Monday to Friday, sometimes Saturdays and Sundays, depending on how far behind I fall or if things prop up in the week that just I can't help. I would always compensate for that by working a few hours either in the evening or in the weekend. Just whatever happened. And so it would typically every day, that's how it would look. And I'd try and do some stretching throughout the day as well, because otherwise you just get a little bit too all stiff and cramped
Yeah,
from being in the same position for hours.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think for me, the most important thing is balancing an exercise and healthy work life uh, with a work routine. So not just eating chocolate and drinking Coke to keep the energy levels up, actually having a structured diet as well as exercise and work routine has been key, like massive.
Oh man, it's been massive for me too.
Yeah.
I've done a total change in my diet and lifestyle, and kicked just about every addictive substance out, which was so boring, so awful for the
Yeah.
first few months. I had no idea how I'd give up coffee. That was a big one.
Oof.
So now I still need to have that taste. It's still a psychological addiction, but now I'm
Yeah.
having decaf coffee, and I give myself one coffee a day, so that's all right.
Nice.
But wow. So goals, I can tell, are very important for you as well. And so can you give me an example of how you go about setting a goal, maybe an example of one of your goals that you're happy to share with us?
So, a lot of the way that I work is just based on my personality, what works well for me. So, I need to stress that what works for me is not going to work for everyone else, but you can take parts of many different business structures. So, I've looked at how CJ Henry works, how all these other artists, Joel Rea, heaps of awesome artists out there, how they work, taken bits and pieces that have resonated with me, and I've created my own structure which I've played with and massaged and changed as time has gone on. So the goals that I have ended up setting have come in different stages. So I'll have a short-term goal, which is 3 months. That would look like a body of artwork that I can use to make up a show. I don't usually work on a body of like the same concept for an artwork longer than 3 months because I get bored of it. It's pretty simple. Any longer than that, you're looking at something that will evolve over a year. So I'm looking at maybe adding elements to the painting that I wouldn't usually work in that I feel would make it a more valuable painting. So that I implement and bring into play over a longer period of time rather than just suddenly changing everything and everyone freaks out. It's sort of got to happen a bit slower. And then I look at a long term goal. So I'm looking at a 5 year goal as well. So you've got your short term, medium, your long term goal. And that's where I want to see myself in 5 years' time compared to where I am now and what I have to do to get there. So, for example, I've been working on animal portraits for the past 3 years. And by the end of next year, I want to be making artwork that incorporates more than just animals. So there will be narrative, humor, other elements that bring in color. Just because there's nothing wrong with the animal portraits, I just need to move beyond that,
Mhm,
grow and
mhm.
establish more than where I am now. So if I am exactly in the same spot that I have been, then there hasn't been any growth. And that to me is a big part of my goals is seeing growth happen over the short term and then eventually the long term. So I keep track of it. I monitor it, I measure it, and I see how viable what was at the start of the 5 years, what my goal was then, how viable it really is the closer I get to that deadline and what I've done to make that happen. So yeah, goals. I feel like if I just had one goal that I worked towards, I'd get to that goal and then have nothing afterwards. It'd be like you get to the finish line, yay,
Yeah.
okay,
Now
sort
what?
of
Yeah.
like, yeah, now what?
Yeah.
So, like, I did a marathon in Perth and all this training, all this hard work, and then you cross the finish line and then you don't run again for another year, sort of a thing. So, I don't want that to become my art career. I want it to be a progressive thing.
Mm.
So, that's what structure I follow with the goals.
Mhm. So, marathon? Sorry, again. I don't. I run, but I'm not a marathon yet. That's interesting. What has that got to do with your art, Carla? Like, how does?
Ah,
Isn't this interesting? Because I personally, I'm being cheeky with that question, of course, but
yeah.
I personally feel that physical exercise And when it comes to having a goal, when it's tied up with something physical, is an amazing, wonderful metaphor to then feed your creativity. So, have you
Absolutely.
found a cross fertilization there?
Absolutely. It's, well, the discipline and the focus that you need to be able to train for something like a marathon every day, despite the weather, despite how you feel, is exactly the way that I look at how I work within what I do every day in the studio. I mean,
Mhm.
it's not running 15 kilometers a day, it's working 15 hours a day in a position that isn't always going to be comfortable and working towards a goal every single day, despite how you feel about it. So I feel like there's a huge correlation between training physically for something, because it's not just a physical thing. I found that especially with the marathon, and last year I did quite a few posts on it. I did Kilimanjaro with my husband, and it becomes
Wow.
no longer just a physical battle. It's mental. I mean, it's all in your head. How far you keep going, how much you push yourself, and that does translate a lot through the painting. And I mean, it sounds romantic, oh, painting every day, but it's really not. I
Yeah.
mean, it's hard work when you don't feel like doing something that you have to do to get from point A to point B, whether it's a physical destination or it's a goal or it's a financial thing. To get from where you are to where you want to be is not going to be a walk in the park most of the time, if
Yeah.
all the time. So there's a definite correlation between the discipline it takes to train for a marathon and the discipline it takes to grow your business, whether it's as an artist or whatever it is that you do. It takes a lot of self-sacrifice and discipline. Yeah.
This is fantastic because as I'm listening to you, I'm hearing there are so many things that I kind of I'm bouncing around in my head going, oh wow, I kind of think like that too. Um, Part of the reason why the physical exercise is so important for me, and not just physical exercise, but it could even come down to, feeding my mind, nourishing my body with the
Mm,
right food, spending time with the people that really matter to me, doing something that interests me outside of that, having some sort of spiritual connection as well. I
absolutely.
find that, and I learned this from Dr. Demartini, who was my guest for episode 3 of the podcast. And Dr. Demartini talks about this in a way that human beings have 7 major areas in their life, and it's our job throughout our lives to empower each one of those 7 areas. I found that where most artists kind of ran into trouble through their careers is when they've got one of those things out of balance, or they've completely neglected one of those items. And the physical thing was quite a big thing for me, and watching other people that would destroy themselves with substances, for instance. I found that, and it's almost like artists are, by and large, flaky people who are undisciplined and aren't empowered in every area of their lives. I mean, I'll give you another one: finances, money. That's an area that a lot of artists struggle with, and it's quite a challenge to shatter that myth, in a way. So it's interesting hearing you talk about this. I imagine that you've got a very similar philosophy in trying to activate each one of these zones.
Yes, absolutely. And the more I get involved in being an artist, the more I realize that the art itself doesn't create the entire career. It's actually mostly business, and assessing yourself and looking at it from a business perspective as well as being an artist. So it's, yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Look, this has been fantastic so far. We haven't even gotten to the work itself, which is something I was really dying to talk to you about, because you've got a particular style that just looks it's incredible the effect once the painting's done. But looking at, like, let's take your fantastic male lion that you posted on your Instagram recently, and I wish I could see that original in the flesh. But you literally detail every hair that you can see. Now, for me, I don't have patience for that, but I admire that kind of dedication. Talk us through your process and how you build up a painting. Maybe let's talk shop a little bit here and
Yeah.
run us through your techniques.
Um, Everything I do is self-taught, so I'm not sure what techniques I'm using when I paint at all. So I just work in a lot of layers. So I call my mapping layer, like I'll do a base color and then I do a mapping layer. This is where I just do lots and lots and lots of little hairs that form the base, almost like an opacity layer. Because I work in acrylic, there it can work layer over layer really quickly. And so every layer that then goes on top of this opacity layer is building up the tones for what the final one looks like. And it's just mind numbing layers of lots and lots and lots of little dashes. But I don't actually paint every hair.
I'm
I
sorry, I meant no
actually,
insult by that.
no, that's good. I'm glad it looks like I do, because there's a lot of areas that I will always leave unfinished. A lot of areas that the paint is still quite chunky and I haven't smoothed over. So when you see a painting in real life, you go, oh, it is actually a painting. Like you get that the impact of the image itself, which is what you see on social media. But then when you actually look at it in the flesh, you can see the working of it and the artist hand behind it. So it's not completely photorealistic or hyper realistic. It is realistic, but there are so many parts of it where I'll leave unfinished, or uh, chunks of paint or bits and pieces where it still leaves a bit more of the artist in there as well. You could also say it's probably areas where I felt a little bit lazy in and just sort of went over quickly, but then came back later. And then just, yeah, as far as it comes to technique, I think just patience.
Yeah,
I don't even know how to explain it.
yeah.
A lot of people ask me, oh, can you do a tutorial? Can you teach us how to do what you do? And I was like, I'd love to, but I don't know how to tell you how I do what I do. I just paint what I see. I
Yeah.
don't know what it's called, or how to actually deconstruct that. So I think that's why I post the videos. Like you can see the time lapses where it goes between layers, and it's sort of it's dark, and then there'll be a light layer, and then I'll darken it again. I'll add another light layer, and it just goes between dark and light until it reaches its happy medium where it looks like it does in the photograph.
That's wonderful though. I mean, because the final, amalgamation of all of these techniques, that you've picked up, self-taught. I love that. But the final result is so impressive, and I'm not
Oh,
just
thank
saying that.
you.
Again, these paintings just grab you, and I really would love one day to be able to see the original. Even of that wolf. It's kind of interesting. Again, I got the same wolf on my hat. I love it. I got a soft spot for wolves and big cats and all these things. So what is there a particular animal that's your favorite animal? What's your favorite thing to paint?
I think my favorite thing to paint would be uh, I like cute things more so than like big impressive things. So if I could paint super cute things all day every day, that would just be total and utter heaven for me. But when it comes to the visual, and then like finishing it, I think tigers would
Tigers.
have to be
Mhm.
really high up there.
Brilliant.
Uh, Anything with patterns, I think this is something I've recognized in myself. I paint things with patterns easier than I do things that are monotone, like a lion or a brown bear, because the patterns break up the mass of fur that I'm looking at painting. So it makes it seem a lot less intimidating. So I think patterns have a lot to do with my sanity by the end of the painting. Whereas the first acrylic painting I painted was this massive life-size grizzly bear, And I had a nervous breakdown halfway through. It took me a month of full-time work to do. And
Wow.
that's probably why it was so draining, is just because there was no break in the masses of brown fur. It was just a lot of
So,
work.
so while you're applying these techniques, what is your mind doing? Do you have to occupy it with music, podcasts,
I
audiobooks?
listen
What
to ebooks, I listen
ebooks?
to podcasts, I listen to
Great.
music. Yeah, my brain just goes off on a holiday, and it becomes a very mechanical. It wasn't at first. It took a lot of focus and a lot of figuring out at first. So what I'm doing now and how I'm working now has taken me years to get to. I didn't work this easily, like at the start. That it was hard work at the start, and I just couldn't for a second. Like if someone spoke to me, I had to stop what I was doing and turn around, which would really annoy me. Whereas now I can have a conversation. I could even be painting now while I'm talking to you, but I'm giving you my 100% attention.
Oh, wow. Aren't we
So
lucky?
it's taken a lot for me to get to the point where I'm so comfortable now with my process and how I work with the colors, that I'm able to listen to ebooks. And if I'm listening to ebook, I'll be working for 4 hours without realizing it, and then be like in pain with my shoulders being like that the whole time. I'm like, why am I so sore? Oh, it's because I've been listening to an ebook and painting.
You get the shoulder thing too.
Yeah.
I lock up. I got one spot, and then when I get home in the evening, I have to get Rachel to get her knuckle and just
uh,
jam it in there, right there next to the shoulder
yeah,
blade.
I use a
You know.
foam roller and roll out my back. But
Oh
now that I'm
goodness.
I'm pregnant and my little girl is getting, I've got 6 weeks to go. She's sitting quite high up, so sitting for 2 hours at a time, I get heartburn like crazy, and so I got to stand up, and then I get backache, and so I got to sit down again, and then I get heartburn, and so it's just like this
Oh
constant
wow.
juggle of
Yeah.
physical discomfort now.
Yeah.
But not too long to go, so it'll be good.
Well, so that moment when you realized that painting was no longer a conscious exercise taking up mental bandwidth, and now suddenly it becomes second nature and you're able to occupy, your mind with something else. Do you remember that moment where when the switch was flipped?
Not really. I think it happened slowly, and it possibly happened because I wanted that to be what it was like.
Right.
So I would create an environment where I was forced to take a step back almost from being so analytical about how I was working to let it flow. I think making it a natural process is important to the final product, finding something that comes across a lot more natural rather than something that I've overworked and been over conscious about. So the work I did right at the start of my career, I find it very stiff, almost
Sure.
like stiff, not in posture, but stiff in the way I used the materials and the way that the paint went onto the
Mhm.
canvas, and essentially how it looked to me, was very just, I don't know, not quite as interesting as how it comes across now, even though there might not be a visual difference between what I did right way at the start and what I'm producing now. From my point of view, it just happens a lot easier and there's a lot more freedom in it. And I don't always worry about whether or not I get the layer color right, because that's fine. I'll just do another layer on top of it, sort of a thing. So there's a lot more forgiveness, I think, with myself
Yeah.
now, which is good,
Isn't it
healthy.
interesting? I find that process and methodology actually free me up,
Mm,
quite a lot. Before, when I was involved in really labor-intensive paintings, and also consequently involved in a lot of abortive work because I didn't have that
mm,
methodology behind me. I would end up with very stiff paintings, and I go through a very similar process to what you do with your acrylic paintings. You've got your mapping. I call that blocking in. So I'll start
yep.
off with my blank canvas and then block in, and then apply what I call modeling over the top of that, where it gets a little more intricate. And then
Mm,
I've got a really good base at that point to apply the details.
yeah.
And I've seen other artists who have got a different approach yet again. But
Yep.
I found that when I employed that methodology and I had that process behind me, then suddenly It was a moment like that for me. That's why I was asking as well, because I find it very interesting from what you're saying. I remember working in my studio, and I just had this urge to listen to something. So wanted to listen to some music, and then I found I was just not thinking about the painting at all.
Yeah.
What my brain jumped to was actually the mental chatter within, which again is not a healthy thing,
Mm.
because that tended to make me quite negative. But then I thought, okay, you've got to feed your mind here with something constructive,
Yeah.
beneficial, positive, and educational thing. So when you're listening to an audiobook, give me some titles. What kinds of things are you getting stuck into?
Well, podcasts, it would be anything from Business Wars. I listened to a series called Inspirational Women of Business that goes through all the major key players, women of business. At the moment, I'm listening to an ebook series. It's like a fictional, methodological, just entertainment stuff. Stories like that make me really like forget the time, and I really enjoy that. It's like watching a really good movie, except you're not.
Sure.
It's just in your head.
Yeah.
So I love reading books that are engaging like that. Anything really that's just a good listen. I mean,
Mm,
when you're listening to 10 hours of audio a day,
yeah.
it doesn't really fit a specific criteria at the end of the day. It just sort of anything. But I love documentaries. I'm listening to one on Audible about the dark web, which is really interesting. Yeah, so many different things. There'll be wildlife podcasts. There will be all sorts of things. It's a mixed mashup, really.
Fantastic. Let's bring things back. I appreciate you sharing your technique and a little more about how you create these paintings. I wouldn't mind just backtracking for a moment, though, back into the business side, because again, I'm finding this really interesting talking with you now, um, because I think you are, a fantastic role model for young potential creatives out there that can say, hey, here's an example of somebody who is making this work full time. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the business side? So we've talked about your schedule and about staying motivated and having a very disciplined approach. But now how do you just keep it going? How do you keep the gig going and making sure that you continuously show up every day? And maybe from there, maybe even what advice you would offer to somebody who is just starting out, just wanting to take that leap of faith into their creative passion.
Yeah. So as an artist, there are a few different avenues that you could go down. So I started off making an original painting and digitizing it and offering prints as a purchasable option. So at that stage, I thought that's what I wanted to do. A lot of artists do this as well because it is an affordable option and you get a lot of sales. Unfortunately, it is also very labor intensive. There's a lot of logistics, a lot of posting, a lot of documenting, photographing, getting prints. So there's a lot of financial outlay as well as your time that takes away from creating the original artwork itself. And you're looking at, I mean, I know this is a good profit margin, but you're looking at maybe 20% profit margin for the amount of work that you're putting in there. And I was finding, because I was doing a few originals, trying to make prints, and I was also doing commissions, that my time was better spent making once off artwork for higher value rather than making prints and then essentially selling knockoffs of the original artwork that I was making. So my transition then became focused on creating value, adding value to my collector's experiences, to the artwork itself, to the experiences of people online. So I focused my time more intensively on my original artwork rather than uh, immediate sales, I guess. And so creating value where it is most important to you. So I would say to artists, decide what business you want So if you want to create artwork that is accessible to to a larger body of people, so you're looking at creating more quantity versus quality to reach that target market, or you can go down the avenue of a more valuable item that reaches a smaller amount of people that you can dedicate more of your time to producing and therefore selling. So my business took on the more valuable aspect rather than the quantitative aspect. So I had to become very decisive about how I was going to do that and what that looked like. And I had no idea at the start how it was going to go. And sort of it's grown on its own now. And I predominantly now make original artwork, highly valuable original artwork that sells once off to people all over the world. And so the business side of that is constantly evolving, I think, especially where I'm going with my 5-year plan going forward. There's also different ways that you can go with prints. It all comes down to what you want to see as your brand structure. So you can create an original work and still create a range of prints. So we're talking a small number of prints released that are a higher value. So it's hard to sort of give people advice for a business structure that has got so many different variables, because I mean, you can print merchandise, you can put your artwork on t-shirts, on mugs, on everything really. So it comes down to what artwork you're making, so what the visual quality is. I think along the more traditional lines, so the still life, landscape, wildlife artwork, portraiture, things like that. If you're going along the more traditional side, you've got to consider what your audience is going to be looking for. If you're wanting to give them something more valuable, how are they going to see the value? Where are you going to attach the value to? If you want to create something that is a little bit more playful, something that people aren't exactly going to look at from a traditional point of view, but maybe more an interior designer's point of view. So like a big painting, bright and colorful, really playful. It's possibly not too serious. That you can go down more the prints merchandise side a lot easier, because people aren't going to be expecting those pieces to be at a higher value bill. So you got to really assess what artwork you're making, what it looks like from a third person perspective. So I'll get a lot of people that send me photographs of their artwork that they do, and they say, how do I charge lots of money for this? And I was like,
Wow, what a question.
you can't just there's so many different things attached to value. So when you're adding value to a painting, it's not just the painting itself, it's what you're creating around it. So everything that comes down to my videos, the way that I present the artwork, I frame them, I ship them, everything comes with an authenticity package as well. All the sales are done directly through me, and it's a very personal, very involved experience. So the collector's not just clicking adding to cart and then entering their shipping details. I want to know what they're expecting. You know, is the frame going to work for their space? Is the artwork going to work for their space? What are they wanting from this collaboration? Is it an investment piece, or, you know, are they just in love with it? Because I do a reevaluation of the value of my artwork starting end of this year. I'll be evaluating the artwork that I sold 3-4 years ago and sending the authenticity packages so that they have an update market value. So the artwork that people bought 3-4 years ago is now worth 3 times the price. So
wow,
if they were insuring their artwork, they would be insuring it for a lower value for what they would be worth now. So it's also there's a lot of different layers to sort of how I handle my collectors and look after their investment, as well as pursuing the next sale. So I get a lot of my motivation from my collectors. They are awesome people to work with because I'm able to do one-on-one with them, and being able to send them a new authenticity certificate saying, hey, your artwork's actually worth $1,000 more. If you were to lose it in a fire and want me to do it again, I would actually be asking for this much for it, whereas you paid this much. So they can see the growth, and I create lots of charts, and it's all very involved where I can track
That's
the process.
incredible. That's
Um,
incredible. See, I also think in those terms, but I haven't carried it to the degree that you do. That's absolutely amazing. Isn't it interesting as well that your buyers and your clients, they actually want to know that what they have is valuable. I find that, when it comes to pricing our work and putting a monetary value, we sell ourselves short all the
all the
time.
time. Yeah.
And I found that that's actually cost me a lot of sales as well by making things too cheap. I had people want to know that this was going to be an expensive exercise. And it took me ages to get my head around that, because I realized later that it was what this person could say it was worth at the barbecue. They were like, "Hey, you see
Yeah.
that? Guess what I paid for that?" It wasn't about getting the
Exactly.
deal. Yeah, and
No.
but I love that as a even as a strategy for getting back in touch with your collectors and letting them know, hey. And it's not that I'm sure, because I can see this with your work. It's not that they're primarily concerned with the investment value. They bought that painting because they
Yeah.
loved it. But
Absolutely.
it must be nice to have that added bonus, that benefit of knowing that, hey, it's really, you know, got some gravity and it's really building wealth
Absolutely.
as well.
Yeah, and it's good for them to be able to see it physically as well when they get the new certificate. I haven't sent any new ones out because it's obviously hasn't been happening for so long. I'm only now reassessing the ones that I did 3-4 years ago to resend the value out now, and then it'll be yearly from that. So everything that's 4 years in the past will have a substantial value added certificate attached to it, which I'll send through. And everyone now, I made these like medallions. I don't have any on me at the moment. They're at the back there somewhere. They're an authenticity token that is made specifically with my logo on it, that has the name of that I engraved their artwork into at the back, and it has a certain authentic number that only I keep a record of.
Come on,
So
you got
every
to show me one of these medallions. Come on, I'll
I'll
hold.
go grab it.
And if you're listening to this, she's just going into the back of the studio now to grab one of these and talk to us about it.
So this is one of the sold ones that's sitting in an exhibit at the moment, and they're very patiently waiting for their artwork. So, I mean, I want to get more fancy than this when it comes to the box. So I had a wax seal stamp with my logo printed on it, which I stamped on the box like that.
Wow.
And then in the box, you get this fancy
That is amazing.
medallion.
So let's just describe this for the people that are listening. This is about the size of your average Olympic gold medal, just about.
Yeah.
And it's
So
got your initial, your
my
signature there, your
signature.
logo. And
And then on the back, it's been engraved with CARLA GRACE, token of authenticity. And then it's got a unique token number, which links to the authenticity certificate, the painting, and my records. And then I then engrave it by hand with the title of the artwork on the back of it.
that is
So,
incredible. That right there is such a beautiful example of going above and beyond and adding value. I mean, it might seem, maybe some people are listening to this going, come on, guys, this is really trivial. This is just a little, this is too gimmicky. But I actually think that these little touches make all the difference in the world to your clients. I also think I heard something recently in an audiobook, and it dawned on me that this was what I'd been doing, and also this is what my father, when he was training me in the beginning, and my agent and dear friend Colin Dixon, they were trying to get this through to me. But when I heard it in this audiobook, I don't know why, it's been years later, well over a decade, something went click. It's like, you're not in the selling business, you're in the reselling business. And I feel that all of these touches are like what you're doing here. This makes them want to come back and
yeah,
reinvest in
yeah.
you and reinvest in their future by owning another original. How have you found, in terms of selling, that your repeat business, do you find that's true for you as well? That repeat business is actually makes up a significant portion of your sales?
Absolutely. I get collectors coming back all the time for another piece. Uh, I guess they just like me as well because they invite me over for dinner. If I'm going to the city that they live in, they always want to come and connect with me. So it's not just a sale to me. I'm building a relationship with people that have been part of a substantial part of my success. I don't consider myself independent to my collectors. It's a very close knit, very involved group of people, and so I do my best to like these authenticity tokens. It's just a cool thing to have.
Sure.
I know
Yeah.
if I bought a painting, just getting a painting on its own, you put it on your wall, and sweet, okay, then it's done. Tick. I bought a painting, but then you get something else that you can look at separate to the painting that reminds you of not just the painting, but the person behind the painting and the experience you've had with that person is also part of
Yeah.
that whole experience. It's not just a number, it's not just ticking a sales box. It's you're investing something into someone else's life and they're going to pass that on to their kids. It's an ongoing thing. So to give them something personal, like I'd like to get way more personal than an authenticity token. I want to get far more fancy.
Yeah.
And I've seen other artists, they get like fountain pens made with engravings on it, with the title, with their logo. They get cool brushes made. Like this being a medallion, it's a trivial thing. It can be anything, but when you
Sure.
personalize it to the person that's investing in your career and your life and your brand, it's just a little bit extra, just a nice little touch.
Mm.
And I mean, we want to go even further and, send them my favorite bottle of wine. Like, hope you enjoy this bottle of wine. It's my favorite one. It made me think of this.
Yeah.
You make it far more interpersonal rather than just a transaction because
Yeah.
it's so much more than a transaction.
Yeah. Wow, wow. I just, you have no idea. I just think that is pure gold. That is fantastic. No pun intended on the gold medallion, but that is fantastic because what it comes down to then in this circumstance is you are. You're right. I mean, yes, it's about the painting, okay, and they've got a fantastic painting hanging on the wall if they buy one of your pieces, but also it's the personal association with the artist. That's where the real value lies.
And
And
that's the difference between galleries and being accessible through social media. Galleries
bingo,
will remove the artist completely from the transaction,
bingo.
uh,
Mm,
but social media, you're it. You're everything.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
That's amazing. I had some experiences with galleries where they fiercely maintain that middle ground, and I couldn't even meet them. They're even hovering around at exhibition openings where I might get a chance to meet them, and they're just
yeah,
careful what I would
yeah.
say. Do I want to do a deal on the side? Oh, I'm not inviting them to my studio, am I? And I'm
Mm.
thinking, you know what? This is what I want to do. I want to personally interact with the people that make my life possible. I have genuine love in my heart for them because they allow me to continue to live
And you
my
owe
dream.
it to them
Yeah.
almost as well.
Oh
Like
yeah.
you, for an artist to think of themselves like as superior to their collectors because their artwork is highly valuable and collectible, and these people are spending their money on them. It's naive to separate yourself from your collectors like that because they've worked hard for that money that they're investing in you as well. Like you're working hard for that money that they're spending on you, and they've worked hard for that money that they're spending for you. So you just got to be a good person. Like you've got to be a good person.
Uh, I hear it. I hear it, Carla. I think that's amazing. Look, I have enjoyed this conversation so
Me
much.
too.
I would like to just maybe ask you a question that I ask many of my other guests. It's always interesting where this question goes. Maybe it's a little corny, but I like it all the same because I find myself constantly thinking about my life, the trajectory it's taken, and how have become to be in the position that I'm in now. Being a full-time artist, loving life, loving what I do, loving who I share it with. I often think, if I could go back and change anything, would I? If I could go back and talk to my younger self, what would I say? And so let me pass that question to you. If you could go back and talk to Karla as a 10-year-old girl, what advice would you give her?
Uh, this is actually something I think about a lot. It's actually quite a big passion of mine to have someone speak in my life about art in a way that destroys the stereotype associated with it. So I'd never wanted to be an artist because, the starving artist, not a good career choice. So I wish that during school, so not even uni, during school, when you're thinking about what you want to be when you grow up, and how adults always ask kids that. So what do you want to do when you grow up? I wish that I could go to the little young version of me, even through to the last years of my high school, and say, you can be an artist, not just because you're good at it, but because it's a viable option. And these are the things that you should focus on rather than art school, like study business, study marketing. Think about what art you like and why you like it, and then study that. Like going into high schools, like I have this dream where I go to high schools and I talk to the art students and get real with them about what it is to be an artist. Like none of that's taught at high school. People don't even think about art as a business. So yeah, I would go back to little 10-year-old me and say, don't worry, you can be an artist if you want to be. And just don't worry about what other people think about it, because anything's possible, really, if you're good at it.
Well, Karla, I must admit, this has been a real treat for me. I feel so motivated right now to get back down to the studio and get back into painting. Um, Thank you so much for being on the Creative Endeavor podcast. Maybe could you tell people out there where they can find more of your work and connect with you?
Yeah, I have everything online through Facebook, Instagram, and I also have my website. So Carla_Grace_art is where you'll find me on Instagram. Otherwise, CarlaGrace'Art.com is the website, and Facebook is Carla Grace Art. So those are the three main platforms that I use, and I'm accessible through them daily.
Fantastic. Well, Karla, thank you so much for being on the Creative Endeavor.
Thanks for having me. It was awesome.
Now, I really hope that you've enjoyed this episode of The Creative Endeavor. And if you did, then make sure you hit that like button for me and leave me a comment down below. If you'd like to find out more about this week's guest, Karla Grace, then you can find her on her website. Simply visit www.carlagraceart.com. She can also be found on Instagram at Carla_Grace_art. Make sure you follow her, make sure you follow her closely, and you'll learn some more about how to dominate your business. I'm sure of it. I even picked up a few bits of information from Karla in this episode that I'm going to apply directly to my art business. Make sure, if you haven't already, go to my website at www.andrewtischler.com/subscribe. Make sure you subscribe while you're there. Enter your name and email address. It's free to do so, and I'm in touch with my subscribers regularly. I'll see you again real soon.